Hey, Wilson.
Hi,
Bye-bye.
Scott.
Bye,
Bye,
yeah.
Dev.
Bye.
All right, Wilson. Thanks for joining us. It's again Singapore. It's late at night there. So
Yep.
what do you have? About almost 12 o'clock, right? 20 to 12?
Yes.
All right, if you can share your screen, then you can get going. All right.
Can
Again,
everyone see that?
yep, I think so.
Yes. Okay,
Off you go. Thank you.
great. So, as Scott mentioned, my name is Wilson, and I live in Singapore. And my talk today is about developing a game in Quasar. So the first thing is, if you've been involved in the HTML5 game scene, is what? Quasar and not Phaser? Yes, absolutely, Quasar and not Phaser for various reasons. Okay, so this is the
All right.
overview of my presentation. So basically, I'll say a little about me and how I got the idea. Then I'll talk a little about the game and why I chose Quasar and the game library that I chose, which is Melon.js, and the challenges that I overcame in creating this game. And finally, I'll go through some code samples on how to integrate Melon.js with Quasar. So about me, I'm from Singapore. These are exciting times right now, even in the middle of the COVID-19 infection. We're having a general election and we're going to the polls this Friday. So my full-time job is I'm a criminal defense lawyer at Trident Law Corporation, and my part-time business is called Custom Automated Systems Private Limited. I develop legal and financial technology apps as well as games, and my main hobbies are software development and the Esperanto language. That's the Esperanto flag there, the green one. So how did I get the idea? Well, basically, Singapore went on a lockdown known as the circuit breaker sometime in April to May, and I was wondering what I could do with the spare time that I saved on commuting, like about an hour each way, as I was working from home. And there were also three public holidays during that period, so I had a lot of spare time on my hands. And I thought I would be the first to create a COVID-19 game in Singapore. After I created it, I realized that somebody else beat me to it, and the game is called Fight the Virus. So, what is the COVID-19 game? It's basically a very simplified real-time strategy game. If you've played StarCraft or Age of Empires, basically you have units and you have buildings, and you can go around and command your units to kill people and things like that. So, in this game, there are only three types of player units that can move around. Three types of player buildings that do various things but are fixed in their position, and there are three types of enemies, which are basically viruses, and one type of resource, which is oxygen, that replaces like money or gold in most real-time strategy games. So the objective is to kill all the enemies with your units, and it currently only supports a single player mode with a random map. So the three types of units are basically blood cells in the body. The first is the erythrocyte or red blood cell. That's your basic builder and gatherer unit. So just like in real life, red blood cells gather oxygen from the lungs and then they send them to the organs. In the game, one thing fictional is that red blood cells build buildings. They don't build anything in real life. And the other is the lymphocyte. In real life, this is a white blood cell that generates antibodies. So in the game, it's a ranged unit that shoots an antibody icon at the viruses to kill them. And the other type of white blood cell is the phagocyte. In real life, it kills by engulfing the viruses or bacteria. And so the game mimics this by making it a melee unit. So it has to go right up next to a virus in order to kill it. So there are three types of buildings. The first is called bone marrow, and similar to its role in real life, it actually produces blood cells. So it's where you go to build the blood cells that move around. And the other building is the pulmonary artery, and that's where red blood cells go to collect oxygen. So it's the icon there is lungs. So it's just like how in real life your lungs are where your body gets oxygen, and capillaries are where oxygen is deposited, and it's again similar to real life where oxygen is transferred through the capillaries from the blood cells to your organs. And pulmonary arteries and capillaries have to be built some distance away from each other. So the three enemies are SARS, the first virus to hit humankind. In the game, it has the highest damage but the lowest speed. MERS, the next big virus to hit, it has medium damage and medium speed. And finally, the star of the show, I guess, COVID-19, which has the lowest damage but the highest speed. And the high speed is meant to reflect its high speed of infection. So gameplay is relatively simple. It's similar to most other RTS games. The difference is that because this game runs on both mobile as well as desktop, so there's a button that allows you to choose whether you want to drag to select or drag to scroll. And drag to scroll is a behavior that's necessary for mobile, because on the desktop, you can simply move the mouse cursor to the edge of the screen to scroll. And you click on an individual unit or building to select it. And when you select bone marrow, there will be buttons to build the different types of blood cells. And when you select a red blood cell, you have buttons to build different types of buildings. If you select any other type of unit uh, or building, then basically you will see some information about that unit or building, such as the health, the damage. If you look at the screenshot, the attack rate, the range, and the speed. And if you select a white blood cell, such as a lymphocyte or a phagocyte, and then after that, click on one of the viruses, then that white blood cell will go and attack the viruses. So there's a tutorial which guides users step by step. It begins by collecting and depositing oxygen, and it teaches you how to build bone marrow and use the bone marrow to build white blood cells, and then finally use the white blood cells to kill a virus. So I think one interesting thing about how I built the tutorial is that I made very extensive use of promises. So every act, like for example, clicking on the red blood cell, that calls resolve on a promise, and then that uh, moves it to the next step, which is actually another function in an array. So the question is, why Quasar? So Quasar, firstly, is multi-platform, and I think it's the only framework that supports Bexus. So no other framework supports so many different platforms. I could deploy the same app uh, to Chrome Web Store, Firefox Web Store, Cordova for Android. I don't have an Apple developer account, so I didn't deploy it on iOS, and Electron, and also as a single page app. And the good thing about Electron is that I can also deploy it to the Snap Store, so it can be downloaded on Ubuntu and other Linux computers very easily. So Quasar also has a very large suite of components, and Quasar is used for UI elements in the game. Initially, I had tried to render UI elements manually using the game library, and that was taking up a lot of time. So thankfully, there's Quasar to save the day. And an important reason why I chose Quasar was also so that I could take part in the Hackame competition, and I'm proud to say that we won an honorable mention for our Bex version. So more reasons why I chose Quasar is that I previously had a very good experience when I was developing another app in Quasar known as Keto Share. There's a screenshot on the right, and it's an app for sharing ketogenic recipes and eateries. So the ketogenic diet is basically a meat diet. You eat high amounts of fat, medium amounts of protein, and low amounts of carbohydrates. So I have also always been a Vue developer, and before Quasar hit 1.0, I used to use something called Vue Onsen UI, but it was somewhat lacking. It had far fewer widgets, and it didn't have the cross-platform features of Quasar. And another thing is Quasar has really nice widget design, and Quasar is a framework that supports glossy buttons, which I really, really like, although I know it went out of vogue in the 1990s, but I still love it. So for the game library, I chose Melon.js. So this is the second part of why Quasar and why not Phaser. So why didn't I choose Phaser? One is because Phaser is split between Phaser 2 and Phaser 3. Phaser 3 is not backward compatible with Phaser 2. So this is a similar situation with Python, and I hope this won't be the case with Vue 2 and Vue 3. And the other thing is Phaser 3 has no isometric and tiled map support out of the box. Melon.js supports both tiled and isometric maps, even though I didn't use isometric maps for this game. And it also supports maps saved using the tiled map editor. So although I didn't use it as I'm generating random maps currently, I might use it in a future release. The other good thing about Melon.js is that it automatically switches between WebGL and Canvas, so it renders as fast as possible on devices that support WebGL, and Canvas is used as a fallback if the device doesn't support WebGL. So some of the challenges that I overcame when creating this game, firstly, when I initially created the game, I created a queue layout as the root element, and then it contained a router view and a queue page container, and basically the play screen was a div that would only appear when a particular route was selected. Uh, and the problem is that when that particular component was swapped out, then Melon.js wouldn't work thereafter and it would show a black screen. So the solution was to overlay a div. So basically, there's a Melon.js div that contains the playing screen that's underneath and it's always there. Uh, and then if the menu is displayed or the settings page is displayed, then it's displayed on top of it. Another problem that I faced was bounce scrolling on iPads and iPhones, which made it hard to drag the map. And this was partially fixed by setting the document element and body width and height to 100% and the position to fixed and overflow to hidden. But even then, there was still a bit of bouncing around on iPhones and iPads, which still makes it a bit difficult to drag the map. Another problem I faced was that the Android app was initially banned by Google for COVID-19 references, and the solution to this was that I renamed the game to the viral game on Android. Subsequently, it got banned again because there was a reference to COVID-19 in my promotional video, but I appealed, and thankfully, Google accepted my appeal, and it's back live on the Play Store, and it's also live on the Samsung Galaxy Store where there are 98 downloads, I believe. So here's the interesting part, how I integrated Melon.js with Quasar. One thing about my development style is that I use Vue Builder Webpack plugin. So I basically split my component code into HTML, JavaScript, and stylus files. So uh, Vue Builder Webpack plugin basically generates single file components that refer to the HTML, JavaScript, and stylus files. So as you can see in the screenshot below, there's a screen div, and the ID is screen and the ref is also screen, and that's what I use for the play screen. And it it is basically obscured by all other screens if there's another path that's currently being displayed. So as you can see, there's a queue layout below that div, and it contains a queue page container and a router view. So there's also a toolbar component. You can see it on the screen. It only appears when the game is in play mode, and basically it contains the toolbar. It's a toolbar that contains the buttons to build buildings and units and show information. Sorry. Okay, so this is what my app.vue.js, that's the main component. That's what the mounted hook looks like. And basically, what it does is first it prevents the user from clicking back. And then the other thing it does is that if the user sets the setting to full screen mode, then it tries to set the browser to full screen mode. And you can also see there that it calls the initialization function of melon.js, and it calls it with the ID of the screen div. The canvas is scaled to fit the viewport, and it it varies according to the dimensions of the window. And after that, it loads the audio, and then it preloads the resources. So Melon.js uses the concept of states to render screens, such as menu screens and play screens. But because I use Quasar to render all the other screens, such as the menu screen and the setting screen and the high score screen, apart from play, so I only had to have two states. One is play, and the other was a blank screen. And in the play state, I used a variable called view. It's a reference to the app.view component. And basically, that's used so that the play screen can communicate with the toolbar, which contains the buttons and display progress information and so on. Yep. So that's basically it. That's the URL of my games website. And I open the floor for any questions. Sorry, Scott, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on mute. Typical teleconferencing mistake.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the something you reminded me of is that YouTube might have an issue with us saying COVID-19 all the time. In the video, I noticed that some YouTubers are avoiding saying that. So hopefully that won't be the case with our video. But other than that, I do have one question for you. Anton Cherry asked, he said, how long did it take you to build the game?
About slightly less than 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
pretty
In
good.
fact, you would probably use less time if you could work on the game full time, because I was like only working on it after work and on public holidays and on weekends and so on.
Wow. So spare time, 2 months too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Wilson. No other questions.
Thank
And great presentation. Appreciate your time, taking the time, and hopefully to hear some more from you in your endeavors with Quasar.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. Bye bye.
Bye bye.